Ladies and gentlemen, we are here for an important reason, and you'll soon find out, and it'll give you pause to reflect and to, you can't go wrong. Try it. Just try. With love as your guide, rest assured you're in good hands. So today, ladies and gentlemen, is the Friday of Sorrows. And there was a time I couldn't even read a comic strip, but I learned this poem by a buddy of mine reciting, so now I know a little bit of how, people that didn't know their languages, were able to communicate. He finally taught me this. And his nickname was the Big Wheel. But he taught me this poem, that I walked a mile with gladness. She chatted all the while, but left me none the wiser for all that she had to say. But oh, I walked a mile with sadness. Nary a word said she, but oh, what I learnt when sorrow walked with me. And now what comes as a real, serious, real event, a situation, can turn it around because we have the likes of our guests. Him and his fellow scientists, doctors, they take an oath to help. And we were so grateful. My friend and the psychiatrist, the official psychiatrist for Wales Certified, and a man for all ages, my friend, Dr. Chuck Zorumski.
Well, hey, Kevin, it's great to be with you today, and as always. And this is really an important topic. And back on St. Patrick's Day, I happened to hear your show with the two ladies from Addiction is Real, and man, that was a very impactful, meaningful, and timely presentation about the seriousness of drug use and drug abuse. And so when you contacted me and said, why don't we do something broader about mental health? I thought this is a great opportunity. So that's what I'm here to just have a conversation about it. You've introduced me, and I've done enough of these shows that probably people are sick about hearing my background. But I start with the interaction with you from being a goalkeeper and a soccer player and a soccer coach. But my real life is one of being in medicine and a psychiatrist by clinical training. And I'm also a neuroscientist. And that means from a standpoint of what I do for a career, I know a bit about mental illness, I know a bit about mental health, and I know a bit about how the brain works. And being a former athlete, that's probably a dangerous combination of things. But today we're going to talk about less about the sports aspects of things, but more about the mental health and mental illness kind of side of this. And just to put it in a little bit of perspective, one of the things that I've done as a career, and one of the things I think has been really important for what I do, is to interact with people who are not in medicine and try to teach them about psychiatry and educate them about what psychiatry really is. And as a matter of fact, I used to do that through something called Mini Medical School here at Washington University, which was a program meant to help non-medical people understand what goes on in medicine, including psychiatry. And out of that work, a guy named Gene Rubin and I, who was a close colleague in the Department of Psychiatry here at WashU, we wrote a book called Demystifying Psychiatry. Maybe about 15 years ago, we wrote the book, and it was really meant to educate people about psychiatry. So these are topics I've thought a lot about kind of over a long period of my career. So with that as kind of background, I think we can launch into talking about whatever you want to talk about, Kevin. I'd make a couple of upfront comments that are, some of it's personal, and some of it is just more general. But so why should you be interested in psychiatry? And I really like what the title of their organization is Addiction is Real. Well, maybe today our topic is psychiatric illnesses are real. And there are strong reasons why everybody in your audience should be interested in psychiatric illnesses. And I'd break them into two big categories. One is there are societal reasons why you should be interested. Psychiatric illnesses are major drivers of disability and death across the human lifespan. They often hit people early in life and wreck the lives of individuals, sometimes by the time they're 20, 25 years old. Other times the illnesses come on later. So there are major things that understand that these illnesses are not necessarily benign. They can be treated, but they are serious societal and medical kinds of problems. And then the second big reason that, and I'll stop with this and turn things over to you, but the second big reason is that we have personal reasons you should be interested. All of us should be interested in psychiatric illnesses. And the reason is everybody who listens to this podcast knows somebody who has a significant psychiatric illness. It could be within you, yourself. It could be your family. Could be your friends, could be your coworkers, but you know people with serious psychiatric illnesses. And I say that with absolute 100% confidence. And the reason I say that is that the illnesses are way too common for that not to be the case. I mean, some people estimate that at least 30 to 50% of the human population as adults have significant psychiatric dysfunction. And so that means the illnesses are just way too common. And just in disclosure, and I know that's something you do a lot of, Kevin, on these shows. Just by way of disclosure, thinking about what we were going to talk about today, independent of me being a doctor and being in psychiatry, I have known probably 10 or more individuals who died of psychiatric illnesses way too young, and prematurely it would be the word. And what I mean by that is they died before the age of 50 of psychiatric illnesses. Several of them were significant athletes who had done very well, but they died of psychiatrically related kinds of phenomena. So that puts something in a very graphic and kind of grim discussion about how serious psychiatric illnesses are. So Kevin, I'll stop the introduction with that, and let's see what you want to talk about, and we'll go from there.
Well, I tell you, man, oh man, you hit on so many points. I'm sure anybody who's listening, hey, ask this, do that, But what I came down, everybody tries to make fun of it. That, you put the funk in dysfunction. Or, what happened? Well, in most cases that I'm aware of, the family don't know. It was like when you went to the when you talked about people to understand the psychiatry of it, that people they take people, their loved ones, to a doctor, but they don't know what the doctor is telling them. They don't understand nothing, and I don't know. And when it is so unbelievably a happy occasion when somebody rings that bell that they're cancer free. But man, when you are scrambled, when you have the exception of the mind and the allergy of the body, hey man, you you got to find your bell to ring. That this is time to say, hey, there are resources, people, places, and things to help the individual and to help their loved ones around them to help them. You know that funny business of the sports agent. Help me to help you. And I'm telling you, Doc, I could sit down on a couch and I would seriously really believe that you could help me with something that's been 60 years. And what happened was, I'm fortunate that I didn't accident or whatever, that I didn't go early. And you say 50 because that's the stats. But man, making it to being a teenager, making it past teenager, and you say, what? 30? It's unbelievable that we allow when somebody's got a broken leg, hey, fix it, put it, you'll be okay. You don't be hobbling around all the time. All this, but with the mind, oh no, hide him, hide her, and don't fix it, and it is I hope that this can help to start the conversation, to start when you see something, say something. And when you do it, do something. So you got a certificate, doctor, that you can take Waylonese and make it into a formulated sentence and an understanding to carry on. So from what I said is really all I really want to do now is just sit back and listen to you, doctor.
Yeah, wow, Kevin, those are really important and very thoughtful comments that I hope can help a whole lot of people. And they get into the idea that psychiatric illnesses are just that. They are illnesses. They are not moral failures or character flaws or blah, 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 philosophical decisions. They are illnesses, and they are illnesses that affect the most complex organ in our body, and that is our brain. And our brain is vulnerable to doing a whole lot of things, but generating psychiatric illnesses is one of the byproducts of kind of how the brain actually functions, particularly when it gets dysfunctional. So maybe I'll say a few words about the mental illnesses in general. So the first thing I would say, and this is a mantra for me. This is actually why I still come to work at my age, and that is, this is a quote from somebody who's way smarter than I am, and it simply says there is no health for human beings without mental health. And if you have mental health, you can live with a whole lot of other problems in your life. But if you do not have mental health and you are subject to mental illness, most things in your life are going to be much more difficult. And that's in some ways an abstract concept. So we're going to talk about what mental illnesses really are, just kind of briefly, to set the tone. But another point you made, Kevin, is that these illnesses, psychiatric illnesses, are among the best kept secrets in America, for example, and worldwide. And that is, we sweep them often under the rug and like they don't really exist. And that's part of a stigma for these illnesses. So people People are not ashamed to have diabetes or hypertension or cancer or, as you said, a broken leg. But people and their families and friends can be ashamed of having psychiatric illnesses. And that is really pathetic and means we don't really understand. They're not understanding what the illnesses are. So what are psychiatric illnesses? So psychiatric illnesses, we're going to start with the general stuff from medicine. They are what are called syndromes. And in medicine, what a syndrome means is that it's a collection of symptoms that hang together over time. So when we say someone has depression or major depression, for example, as a diagnosis, immediately most of us think, oh, the person's sad and maybe they have crying spells and things like that. That's really true. Sadness and that sort of thing is part of being depressed. But that is not all depression is, and that's really important. There are many major symptoms that go along with being depressed. They include things like sleep disturbance, appetite disturbance, and weight loss or weight gain as part of it, problems with energy, the ability to get up and do things, motivation, the ability to set goals, which I'm going to come back to in a minute because it's a very important concept in psychiatry, and even as part of the syndrome of major depression, things like the willingness or the desire to stay alive. So suicidal ideas, suicidal attempts, things like that are not uncommon in individuals who suffer from depression because they essentially just give up on life and that. And there are very important reasons why that occurs. So suicide is a big risk in psychiatric illnesses in general. So I hope that helps a little bit, that these are not one symptom problems, like I got a thinking problem or I have some other problem. They are complex collections of symptoms that lead people to have dysfunction in their life, disability in their life, frankly. So that's what the illnesses in general are. But these illnesses are generated by the human brain. And that's an important concept, that they are brain disorders. And what they are, as we currently understand them, is their defects are dysfunction, rather, dysfunction in brain networks that underlie key things that our brains do. Three major things are going wrong in every psychiatric illness, every major psychiatric illnesses. And the three things that go wrong, and again, there are brain circuits that drive all of these things. The three things that go wrong are the ability to think. And what I mean by that is the ability to focus your attention on things and to learn and remember new information, to manipulate that information, and to make decisions. That goes wrong across the board in major psychiatric illnesses to different degrees and different illnesses, but it's present there. A thinking problem exists, so-called cognitive problems exist across psychiatric illnesses. A second, and there's specific brain circuits that underlie all of that. A second major set of symptoms in psychiatric illnesses are symptoms that let us attach meaning to the things in our life. These are what our emotions actually do. So, and there's something like 7 primary human emotions. So happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust are among the major primary emotions that we have. And what do emotions let you do? Emotions let you attach a meaning to things that are around you. So when I say I'm happy about something, it means I've got a response to it that gives what I'm doing or what I'm interacting with, the person I'm interacting with, it makes me happy or it makes me sad or whatever. But that's a second set of symptoms. So thinking goes wrong and emotion goes wrong. And then the third thing that I think is really hard for people to understand in psychiatric illnesses is that humans have the ability to set goals and to work for those goals. That's what's called motivation. In every major psychiatric illness, motivation is something has gone wrong with the motivation system that lets people set goals and work for the goals that they want to do. So if you take nothing else out of today, every major psychiatric illnesses illness cuts across all three of those aspects of brain function. It's not that you got one or two of them; you got all three of them if you have major psychiatric problems, and they vary in the degree to which some of those systems are actually involved. And just to make this not so quite so ominous, if you think humans are so really brilliant and everything like that, and we are an amazing species as human beings, the circuits that underlie cognition, emotion, and motivation are very well developed in rodents, mice, and rats. So you think, well, God, why would you ever study mice and rats if you're really worried about human psychiatric illnesses? And the reason is those circuits can be worked out in great detail in animals like rodents. And and that's been a blessing in terms of defining new treatments and new ways to think about psychiatric illnesses. But this is something across the species of mammals and that really does exist. So I hope that helps, Kevin. But that's a little bit about what the illnesses kind of look like as syndromes, multi-symptom syndromes, and then some of the specific symptoms around cognition, emotion, and motivation, and the brain circuits that underlie those things are what goes wrong in psychiatric illnesses. So I hope that helps.
Oh, yes. I mean, and you only brought the rake, but that was the deepest thing that I've heard in quite a long time, and so simple. That's the genius of it all, is that the complex makes simplistic, and you did it exquisitely. You did it, wow.
Well, thanks, Kevin. And just thanks, because that's a really important comment. The reason we wrote the book Demystifying Psychiatry is psychiatry. People think it's a mystery, man. They think it's something out in the ozone. It is very real, and it's very easy to understand what psychiatrists are asking about and why they ask the questions that they do. So thanks. That's a really incredibly important point. Yeah.
Well, and the three thinking, the meaning of emotion, setting goals, motivation. I mean, I've lived with that around, and knew that they was having problems, but I couldn't put it all together. Now I could pass a test. That's the deal, man. And everybody can understand, and everybody can work towards, because it takes a family, it takes the society to get this going. You don't just let them out on the street and say, hey, take care of yourself. See ya. And the last thing I got to say is that we're the north side. And when you talked about the depression, smile and the tears of a clown, like old Smokey says,
Yeah.
when no one is around. And the clown, that our society has made the clown a circus, that he or she can, smile and be sad and all that. And it's all a big joke. And the art of it, the deep art, I've looked at the clown to say, man, they are telling me a story. And it's a story I better pay attention to, and people should walk right on by, And so that's why we're here, Dr. Chuck, Dr. Charles Zorumski, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, my gosh. And
yeah, Kevin, this is really. I mean, this is a great opportunity, and your comments are really. Again, I hope people are listening to it because they're very meaningful comments. And I'm going to make another thing about those symptoms, that thinking, emotion, and motivation, so-called mental trilogy. That's actually a term coined by a great neuroscientist named Joseph Ledoux. That's where I picked it up from. And I think it's so meaningful because it makes things so simple and understandable. But those are the reasons that psychiatric illnesses are so disabling. Why people can't work and sometimes live independently is because of those symptoms. It isn't just that the mood is bad. That's bad enough in its own right. But it's that they can't think So students drop out of school, they flunk out of school, people can't hold a job because they can't think on the job. And then the third one is really the one that I think most people understand the least and have the least tolerance for. And that's the motivation defect, Kevin. And that is, how many times have you heard or I've heard, you know, God, if he'd just pull himself up by the bootstraps, he'd be okay and just get on with his life. He'd be okay. She'd be okay. That is absolutely correct. If they could just pull themselves up by the bootstraps, they might be okay. The problem is the brain systems that let you pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get things done is defective in the illnesses. It's affected in a bad way in the illnesses that you have. Uh, let's take what the ladies talked about from addiction is real, because man, I'm telling you what they had to say was so meaningful to me and just so impacting. Uh, let's take addiction for example. Why does a human being take drugs? Why does a human being drink themselves to death by the time they're 40 years old or 45 years old? What's doing that? Well, the reason people take drugs of abuse and the reason they abuse the drugs is that they feel good. They're affecting the motivation and reward system of the brain. It's the portal of entry for those drugs. It's the first thing they do. So you don't take drugs because you feel miserable. You take drugs because you get high and you think it's a good thing, right? And then you keep taking drugs, and then you have to take the drugs so you don't get the side effects or the withdrawal symptoms from the drugs and other things. But it's the motivation system is the key thing in addictive disorders, or one of the key major defects in the illnesses. So you've got to get people off the drugs that they're on. And man, and Kevin, you talked about this. That is not an easy undertaking. It does not go away in the first days or week that you stop using a drug. It sometimes takes months to years to get over the drugs that you may have been abusing. And that some of the drugs are incredibly powerful on those systems. I mean, the opiates, like fentanyl and heroin and things like that, are unequivocally that way. But alcohol is probably the most common of the drugs that is so highly addicting like that. And in the people I listed, that didn't list, but I told you that there were like 10 or more people that I knew personally outside of medicine who died of psychiatric illnesses. At least 5 or 6 of them died from alcohol abuse. And that's what killed them. And that's what killed them early in their life. And you couldn't get them out of it because it takes a lot of effort, people hanging in there with them, and the right kind of people, like the addiction is real kind of people, helping guide people through all of that. So the motivation problem in psychiatric illnesses is the one we as a society are least tolerant of, but it goes along. If you think bad mood and low mood is part of psychiatric illnesses, the motivation problem is every bit as important, if not even more important, frankly. So I hope that helps, Kevin, kind of put things in a little bit different perspective.
I tell you, bro, Doctor, you brought the shovel on this one. This was, I mean, every one of us is getting this message. It's impossible not to. As it will, like, if I'm help me, fentanyl is like something that will trap a person. It's an actual trap that once you get it in your system, you can't leave it. And then you have to go through a whole system. But it's an impossibility. And the word impossible has I'm possible, but my gosh, it takes so much that you remember that old story. You you you're a crook, but you got two to catch you. I mean, something two to catch you. Is that these people with the fentanyl, they're addicting the people so they would come back and buy their product.
Oh, absolutely, lacing fentanyl into anything that they could put it into. The problem with fentanyl is it's what you might think of as super heroin. It is like really potent. It is really effective, and it is really addicting. And heroin is plenty of that in its own right, but fentanyl takes it to a whole nother planet. Matter of fact, there's even other synthetics that are out there that probably are going to be even worse than fentanyl. And the problem is, and you're absolutely right. So you want to get people to buy your weed, if you think of that. If you're selling drugs, maybe mix a little bit of fentanyl in with it, and man, they get a super bang out of this stuff. The problem with it is that the street pharmacologists sometimes aren't so good at how much to mix. And it only takes a bit of fentanyl to get you to the spot where you quit breathing. That's not a quit breathing because you fell asleep or something like that. It's a quit breathing because those drugs are working on brainstem centers that drive your ability to breathe and the respiration system of the body. It shuts it down. So in effect, when the drugs are laced with fentanyl, the persons that are selling it are setting people up for death, meaning you're losing your business, frankly, because you're killing them off with overdoses of fentanyl. And fentanyl by itself is plenty bad, and it's just awful. It's been an awful thing. So anything that shuts down the fentanyl traffic in the U.S. is, in my opinion, a blessing. And I'll make another comment, which is, and I don't want to get off too far into the legalized drug kind of things, because I hate criminalizing drug users. So decriminalization of drug use, I think, is a really important thing for our society. But making drugs legal does not make them better or easier to live with. And the classic example of this is marijuana, including the concept of medical marijuana, which I really am real skeptical of, frankly. Matter of fact, the literature on that is lousy in terms of its beneficial effects. But so marijuana is one of the more so-called benign of the drugs. Well, those people say, well, it's not like alcohol. Alcohol will destroy your liver, destroy your heart, destroy everything. Well, marijuana is no bargain. And I teach the medical students when I interact with them. I don't do it as much as I used to, but one of the things I would say to them in meetings with them, with the patients, so we'd start by, what drugs are our patients? This is on the inpatient unit at Barnes Jewish Hospital. Go, what drugs are your patients taking? Let's start with that, and they'll list, and it's almost a given on our psychiatric unit, given that the patient smokes nicotine and given that they smoke marijuana, what else do they do? Well, if you think marijuana is good for a human being and is benign thing for a human being to use, you ought to visit the psychiatric units of places like Barnes Jewish Hospital. If you come out of there thinking it's a good thing, you aren't paying attention to what we're looking at in that. So I have a strong opinions about kind of what drugs are. And I'd also say it's even more, because the drugs, including marijuana and cannabis, including alcohol and the other one, if somebody has significant other psychiatric problems like major depression or even a psychotic illness like schizophrenia and things like that, and they're using drugs, sadly, you have no hope that they're going to get better until they get off the drugs. The drugs are robbing them of the motivation to follow through on treatment and follow through on life in general. So you've got to get people off the drugs. And again, this is what the ladies from Addiction is Real were really, one of the messages was really strong in that regard. So anyway, that's a little soapbox thing about it, but it's, I want to say things in a very stern and straightforward way, because I am really struck. I've watched a lot of people's lives destroyed over my career in psychiatry, and psychiatric illnesses will do that to you by themselves. But when you mix in the psychiatric illnesses of substance use disorders, you are adding to the problem and making it really tough to get beyond. And Kevin, one of the things I've heard from you, and so I don't think I'm saying anything that's out of line, but the fact that you were able to stop drinking, a long time ago now, man, almost 40 years ago, I think, roughly, that is an amazing accomplishment. And man, as a society and as friends and family, we should be celebrating for anybody who's able to do that. So thanks for that message.
Well, I'm telling you, what you just said in the last several minutes, on top of everything, that's why we're friends. That's why we communicate, because this needs to be said. And, you know, I could say it, but it wouldn't carry this weight that you had. And top, thank you. I'm so grateful with you and show gratitude for our friendship, because that is what it's at. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, I said, what the hell is this? And, the guy, he couldn't have passed the exam, but he said, it's monkey tranquilizers. What? Were you giving me monkey tranquilizers? And that's the reality of it, is that people are doing, it's like putting hooch in your bathtub. You could get killed. And going around and isn't that something? I know about the boomerang, but is Baracus the guy that all this comes around? Hey, it's gonna make you feel good. Bang, 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 bang. You're out. You come in and the door locks behind you and you're done with. I mean, my gosh, that get it's just so easily taken, and you have such an obsession in the mind, and that the yin and the yang, and you're thinking, well, and I come to find out, and let's see if we can go here. It's the morning after. The deed has already been done. And, you got to say, hey, you got to, is day going to be like yesterday, or something going to be tomorrow? And that comes up to where that thinking you can't because the decision you make is a self-justification rationalization that you're making it look like the best thing, the best decision you can make is going back. Did I leave you off, or
No, no,
okay?
absolutely correct, Kevin. I was just making sure you had said what you wanted to say. So
Yeah, okay.
that is right, and that, but that decision, that morning after decision, when your brain is clouded with chemicals, stuff that humans abuse. I mean, we sugarcoat these words. We call it substance use disorders now. Man, it's abuse and it's addiction. And I don't like the sugar-coated words, frankly. And it says, well, you don't want to stigmatize people. Man, you got a problem. If you're using drugs and it's messing you up, and your statement that the morning after you have to make a decision, right?
Yeah,
What are you going to do? And when your brain is on the stuff, that decision is not so easy. This is why therapists, physicians, strong role models, friends, sometimes the religion that you belong to, the church that you belong to, can help guide you and protect you. And why are those things so important? The reason they're important, particularly the people close to you who are positive influence on you, the reason is that when you're psychiatrically ill to start with, but psychiatrically ill plus drugs, you've got a real problem. And that is that your brain is not really your own, kind of at that point. It belongs to the chemicals in some ways. And that's a big problem. So what the people in your community do for you is they provide you with an outside brain that's not addicted. And they go, Chuck, Kevin, what you're doing is the wrong thing. We have got to help you. And sometimes they don't even listen to you. You say, oh man, I'm okay. I'm gonna be great. I'm just, all I got to do is get through today, and I'm solid, man. I'm going there. Oh, that's all BS, because the next time the drugs are around, the person's taking the drugs again, and it's not going anywhere. So sometimes that surrogate brain of a good friend who's worried about you, a family member who's worried about you, a minister, a church group that's worried about you, they can be a dramatic help. Things like AA, that's giving you another brain, basically. It's a collective brain of AA that is helping you get beyond your lack of control and things like that. And again, I don't want to make all psychiatric illnesses sound like they're substance use. It's just that these things are very closely intertied. And, in society, sometimes we treat psychiatric illnesses as one bucket of illnesses and substance use disorders as a second bucket of illnesses. They are intimately entwined. I mean, you can't separate them, frankly, but yet in our medical delivery system, we try to separate them. In our federal government, we try to separate them. We've got National Institutes for Mental Health, for drug abuse, and for alcoholism, 3 different institutes of National Institute of of Health, which is kind of a strange collection of different institutes that are all related around the same problem. So I hope that follows through on what you were describing, Kevin. But it gets into, how do you get out of this problem? What do you do to get out of this problem?
Oh man, yeah. What helped me early in my recovery, I believe it was Dr. Carl Jung.
Yeah.
To talk about, hey man, and it kind of like it spoke to me. I read the black on the white paper, the black ink on the white paper to say, Kevin, you got to have a psychic change, man. And so it helped me with my, what is it? Is it my, because I'm Irish, that, I take alcohol, or because I'm that side of the family is just a bunch of crazies. They don't drink, but they're crazy. And then either way, I'm hopeless. And it came with that moment of clarity to say that the mental health training to self-help someone is that you identify with the triggers. You identify something goes on in your body, and with me was, I'm starting to grind my teeth, and you say, wow, okay, when that happens, physical, you got to do this and that. And just by doing, rubbing something, doing this, doing that, you feel so much better and able to have some type of clarity to make a rational decision. And they talked about the self-help group to say, listen, man, there's enough people out here that you can help. So when you help yourself, you go out and help others. Amazing things can happen, but you got to have, kind of like a buddy playing. Somebody on the left, somebody on the right. Who's watching behind. And so all these things is that, like, I'll say this, Dr. Chuck, is that in soccer, there's not a mental side. It's all mental. And in life, it's all mental. And coming to this Holy Week, I always think about that tree. Well, that tree, okay. And then you take that apple. I'm going to be so smart. I'm going to, and it never comes out. It never works out. That, it's people outside the chemical are helping. And, it's an amazing thing is that this is 2026. That's a lot of history, man. That's a lot of self-reflection.
Absolutely, Kevin. Absolutely. And the things you're saying at this point, and I think the right things right now. We've talked about some really, hopefully, things that will help people think about psychiatric illnesses and what they are. but also, some of the real seriousness of these illnesses, and this is a strong, important societal problem and personal problem. But the message that I really want to leave with as we continue is that there's help is out there, and you've said this. There's help out there. I mean, those ladies from Addiction is Real are trying to provide their version of help for a specific set of kind of problems, but help for mental illness and psychiatric illnesses, it's out there. There are effective treatments across a broad spectrum of treatments, from medications to psychotherapies to other things that kind of can be done. And those systems can be accessed. I will tell you, one of the sad parts in our society is that the mental health care system is very fragmented. So it's sometimes an albatross for people to look at. I mean, it's like, how do I get into the mental health care system? Well, things like the National Alliance for Mentally Ill, things like Missouri Mental Health, Mental Health America. There are agencies that can kind of help people get in for care. Primary care docs are typically aligned with psychiatry or mental health care, psychiatric kinds of facilities, and so they should be a conduit to getting you into systems. So that's a key thing, is that there are effective treatments out there of a broad nature. There's no one size fits all for the treatment of psychiatric illnesses and substance use disorders. There are many approaches that lead to good outcomes, and that's the goal, is just get to a good outcome. And that should be the norm for psychiatric illnesses, and getting people to that. Matter of fact, one of the things I do at Washington University, not to get off too far into this, is psychiatry needs new treatments. It needs better treatments than we've had. We've got good treatments, but they're not great treatments. They're not the best treatments that we can possibly get, because we're learning so much more about the brain. So I actually run something called the Taylor Family Institute for Innovative Psychiatric Research here at Washington University. And the goal of that institute is to develop new treatments for psychiatric illnesses. That is the specific and driving force behind the whole thing that we do. And I mention that because, your show is really a show about soccer. And the Taylor family, I think a number of people listening probably know of them, but maybe not. So where the Taylor Family Institute came from is it's something that started about 2012, 2013 with support from Andy and Barbara Taylor, the Taylor family, who are Enterprise, the conglomerate that is Enterprise Rental Cars, in that they are so generous to the St. Louis community. Well, one of the things they have a strong interest in is psychiatric illnesses and better treatments in psychiatric illnesses. And I kind of raise this on your show because I think a lot of people in your audience know that the Taylor families, along with Jim Cavanaugh from Worldwide Technology, played a huge, they are the driving force behind the reason we have St. Louis City soccer in this community. So mental health is one of the things that they worry about and really try to help our community around. And I'm a strong beneficiary of that and a strong proponent of what they've done. But, beyond getting new treatments and psychiatric kinds of treatments, there are things human beings can do for themselves if you can get into things. And this is, again, where sometimes your friends and your social network become so important. But things like diet, exercise, taking care of yourself, lifelong learning, continuing to use your brain in a positive way. Those are all things that can help you fight off mental illness and fight off some of the other problems. The problem is when you're in the throes of the illnesses, those things are the hard things to do, but it's getting people back to things like that can be really, really important and good. And then, like I said, I've mentioned this a few times today, and I've mentioned it previously. The social network that you have is really important to human beings. We are social animals. We don't live in isolation. Matter of fact, we do poorly in isolation. So having positive people around you, and I don't mean hanging out with folks who are drinking and using drugs and other stuff like that. That's not going to get you anywhere. But there are many positive people that can be around you. and they are very important to you. And talking with them and seeking their guidance can be a really important thing for individuals. And even seeking out a family member or a friend who's struggling with psychiatric illnesses. But you can do a world of good by just steering them and supporting them as they move into care and other things like that. And then, and the comments about this, just to answer anything else, is the piece that Roman Berkey wrote, and I go back to the Roman Berkey piece because, man, what an icon for the St. Louis community, and what an idol for many young kids playing soccer, particularly goalkeepers, but more in general. But Roman wrote that piece that I mentioned a while ago, which is titled something like "Talk to Someone," and it's the story of the psychiatric kind of symptoms that he struggled with at times in his life and his career as he developed. And it was having positive mentors and people who cared about him that really guided him through all of that, and actually allowed him and promoted him to become the great player that he is today, and that he has been for some time. So the messages I would leave with today, however we go further in this, is really one of, these are serious problems, but help is out there, and you can access the help. That's the key thing, I would say.
Dr. Chuck, I mean, really, under full disclosure, I've always been an admirer of yours, living on the north side. Chuck Z, in the gold, unbelievable. And then I was at some practices with SLU, with the Billikens over at Forest Park, and you weren't there. And I mean, if you didn't make practice, you could have been shipped to Shanghai or something. And the guy said, he's taking a test to be a doctor. Oh, well, that's okay. And then the story is soccer is life, and life is soccer. And this whole ideal behind it is that it's appropriate, and you can't have one without the other. I can't see it, no. And I want to take off to be able to say, I speak for everyone who's listening to this program, that you were just off the charts, so magnificent. And it'll take time, but we'll ready for the next segment that you got, because you always bring it home to where it carries itself. And I just want you to know that I know that you know, okay?
That is great, and much appreciated, Kevin. And you said this really well. And I think about, I'm old enough where I think about my life and kind of how I got to where I am and things like that. And soccer was such an intimate part of that. I don't imagine being what I am today if it wasn't for being a soccer player and a soccer coach. And that was 45 to 50 years of my life were spent being a soccer player and a soccer coach, and man, and I've said this before in other times we've been together, it really was a springboard to other things, and kind of motivated me and drove me and gave me the positive experience with the mentors that I had, the coaches that I've talked about, who guided me and helped me become better than I otherwise was. I mean, they helped make me everything that I am today.
Yeah.
Good and bad. So,
yeah, man, right. And it possibly could just be the position, that's another story.
that's another story. And I loved being a goalkeeper. And
Yeah, man.
man, some days I think about it and I think, man, I couldn't have survived as a field player. Man, goalkeeping made so much sense to me. Field play. I can tell you what field players are supposed to do, but doing it is not something I ever felt I could do. But man, playing goal was like it for me.
Right. Okay, Chuck, thank you so very much, and have a great week toward Easter and your uh, foundation with the what's that?
The Taylor family.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the Taylor
absolutely.
family. My gosh,
Yeah.
it's like forget about Charles Lindbergh. The Taylor family. They say they helped St. Louis. So the best to the best, Dr. Charles Zorumski, and say hello to the missus for me and your wonderful family, your sons and so forth. So I have to leave you with, if is there anything that you want to say, whoever you want to say it to, for as long as you want to say it for, this is it.
Well, hey, Kevin. Thanks, and I hope you have a great Easter holiday and everything like that. I mean, this is a for those of us of the Catholic and Christian belief system, this is the most solemn time of the year. No doubt about that. But one thing that your show and being with you on a few occasions, several occasions now, reminds me is I've been people say, well, to be really good at what you do, you can't just stay in St. Louis. You gotta get out of St. Louis, and you've got to go to the coasts and all that kind of stuff. Well, for me, I've lived with world-class people in everything I've done, from soccer to medicine to science. And it's all been in my backyard. I mean, within walking distance of Grand Avenue, right?
Yeah.
And so just the other thing is be appreciative of what you have and what the opportunities that are around. And I mentioned the book that we did. Gene Rubin and I wrote a couple of books. I'd mentioned Gene as somebody who I met the first day of residency on the medicine service at the old St. Luke's. He was one of the first people I met at Washington University. He
Wow.
and I became lifelong friends, and he's the one that guided me to a career in science. He's the one that believed that I should become a scientist, and that had a huge impact on where my life ended up going. And that's something, Kevin, you can't predict. You
No.
can't predict who are going to be the people who really shape who you are. Just pick the people that you hang around with as folks who have your best interest, and they have your best interest at heart. So that's a thanks to Gene for everything that he did. So thanks again, Kevin. This has been. I hope it's helpful to others, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you like this.
Oh yeah. And and to leave it in closing, you don't know what you don't know. Now you know. And the story goes is that you really know when like you said, that friend, you really know, man. My name is Kevin Whalen. I really know that Chuck Shurumsky is my friend. I know this. And to really know is, wow, life itself. It's unlimited.
Amen, brother. I agree.
Okay.
Take care, Kevin.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right,
Bye
doctor. Bye bye.
bye.